Hello and welcome to episode 247 of the Paint or the Minis Paint Ramble podcast. We put the show together so you can have something to listen to whilst you are sitting at your painting desk and fiddling around, maybe painting some miniatures of any scale, genre or game. Our aim is to have a relaxed and genuine conversation with someone who's as involved in the hobby as you are from any level, top to bottom, because we've all got our own unique and individual stories. So sit at your hobby desk, paint your models, listen to the chat. We really hope that you enjoy the content. This week I speak once again to Mr. Will Rahman-daultrey, the creator of Forbidden Psalm, The Last War, and the upcoming Hope is for the Dead game. He puts together mini agnostic rule sets that are pretty awesome, just even to look at from the art, the story, the idea, the background. They're pretty interesting. So yeah, we hope you enjoy this episode. We did speak to Will back in episode 241. So if you didn't listen to that one, you can go back and listen to more about him and his personal history and the things that he's done before. And then you can come back to this one and you can listen to this new episode where we talk in depth about Hope is for the Dead, the upcoming zombie mini-agnostic game, which is currently being kickstarted as we speak now on the 4th of July. But we also split our time between that and also just talking about a few things that he likes within the hobby tabletop gaming industry in terms of mechanics and things like that. We talk about some general design principles that he appreciates. He talks about the My Little Pony role-playing game. We talk about the use of dice, we talk about infinity, and just a few other little rambly points that are just interesting in terms of game design and preferences and all that kind of stuff, you know, because when you write a game, you know, you've got to choose certain mechanics and you've got to choose certain things, and yeah, it was just good to listen to him talk about what he appreciates and what he likes. As this episode comes out on the 4th of July, as I've just mentioned, Hope is for the Dead is still available to back on Kickstarter. You can back it for 10 quid, 10 dabs, 10 knicker, which I think is a pretty good deal. There's not a lot of stuff that you can buy for 10 English pounds these days. So if you like the sound of the game during the conversation, go and check it out and go and give it a support if you like that sort of thing. Thanks once again to Will for coming onto the show and giving up another hour of his time to us. We really appreciate it and we wish him all the very best in the future. Episode 250 is coming up. We are 3 weeks away. Episode 250 is an opportunity for you guys to get involved in a show. If you've always wanted to be on a podcast, then you can be part of episode 250. There is some questions that I've put in the podcast description, and you can record yourself. You can record yourself answering the questions, and you can send to me. You can email paintalltheminis@gmail.com, and I will edit those together into a big podcast smorgasbord. As long as it's family friendly-ish, I'll put it together and then you can be on the show and you can celebrate the 250th episode by hearing your own voice. You don't need any fancy stuff. You don't need any fancy recording stuff or anything like that. You can record yourself on your phone. There's an app that's called Simple Recorder. Actually, check this out on the Apple App Store. Simple Recorder, you can download it and you just literally press a button, you make some noises, and then you press a button once you've finished making noises, and then you can just email it across to me. Or you can do it on Facebook, you know, we're on a Facebook group, or on Blue Sky, or whatever it is, however you get that file across to me. I'll be able to edit across. I can deal with pretty much all file types, so it doesn't really matter. Trying to get rid of all the barriers for you to get involved. I'll continue to remind you, I'm going to set a deadline and I'll mention that in the next episode. But it'd be really appreciated. It'd be great to hear from all you guys, because remember, the show is not about any one individual person or a small select group of elitist people. It's about all of us. And so I'd be delighted to hear from anyone and everybody who wants to contribute. So you can check out the questions in the podcast description. You can email paintalltheminis@gmail.com, and we can splice that all together and make an awesome 250th episode together as a team. But anyway, that is enough of the pre-ramble. Let's go.
Paint all the minis that you can. And when you paint your minis. Listen to that podcast with Dan Adams, that is.
I know what you're thinking. Did he paint 6 armies or only 5? Well, to tell you the truth, in all this excitement, I've kind of lost track myself. But being that this is Paint All the Minis, the best place for painting and hobby on the internet, and people aren't going to bite your head clean off for posting, you got to ask yourself one question. Do I feel lucky? Well, do you, punk?
So, hey, I am here once again with Mr. Will Rahman-daultrey. How's it going, Will?
Yeah, pretty good, pretty good. I apologize for my voice being a bit different this time. I'm just recovering from a head cold, but otherwise, yeah, pretty good, pretty good.
Nice. So, second time you've been onto the show. How do you feel after the last one? And how much has your life changed because of your previous guest appearance on the show?
Pretty good. I did listen back, and it's a really good show. It's one of the, I hate listening back normally to things I've recorded, but that one I actually quite enjoyed listening. So that was, I think that's a good testament to the questions that were asked.
Yeah, I found that really difficult to start listening back, because even like back in the day when you used to record like an answer phone message, hearing your own voice back is it's pretty grim at times. Say, well, that's cool. You listen back to it. Do you pass it on to any friends or family, anything like that?
Oh yeah, I shared it about with. I put it up on the like Forbidden Psalm Discord and different places, and shared it on socials, and my partner had to listen to it as well, and got good feedback. So
nice. Do you go on? Have you been on podcasts before? You give some shouts out. Have you been on to anyone's before? Any other interviews that we can hear from you?
Yeah, I've been on a couple, but I've gone blank on every single one of them on the top of my head. I'll try to remember them as we go. How terrible is that? There's a bunch of people that have interviewed me now that are really pissed off at me.
Yeah, just having a bit of a cry.
I've done a couple over the years, but I have the memory of a goldfish right now.
Yeah, I feel that, especially with what's going on that we're going to talk about very soon. But before we get onto that exciting stuff, favorite Wills from throughout the ages? That's your name, William or Will? Have you got any favorite Williams or Wills from the past that you appreciate?
Oh God, that's a question. Because all that's coming to mind is William Shakespeare, and I'm not a massive Shakespeare fan. I do love, like, he's great though, because whenever I like just make up a word and people go, you can't just make up words, I'm like, Shakespeare did it all the time, fuck off. Like, of course you can. Like, if he did it, then why can't I? So he's just a fantastic excuse for my terrible spelling. Yeah, so that he's going to be the one I pick right now, because he's the one that's coming to mind.
Nice. Shatner? No, not William Shatner.
No, Shatner didn't come to mind. I think I think I'm too young, and I never really got into Star Trek.
Right.
I'm one of those weird nerds that doesn't really like Star Trek or Star Wars, so both camps hate me.
Right.
Yeah.
Nice. There you go, man. Well, yeah, there you go. Shakespeare's good. It's good that your namesake. You're both writers. There you go. You got a lot in common.
Yeah.
I was trying to explain this to a group of students the day when I was at work, is that there's no such thing as spelling, because they get really obsessed with spelling. I was like, there's no real thing. There's no such thing. Like if you take like leather or door, there's no such spelling. It's just what is generally accepted by a large amount of people as being right. But ultimately, there is no such thing. And it was just, we couldn't fathom, they couldn't get it, they couldn't grasp that idea, is that all we do is we just standardize it so people genuinely know what you're talking about. But there's no right way, really.
Yeah, it's one of the really interesting things about like language in general is how it evolves over time. And then it feels like recently we've got really like hepped up on it being static, which is like not how language behaves. Like language evolves over time, it changes and shifts, and spellings change and shift. And yet we've suddenly become like, no, it has to be unified. It has to be like stuck in the mud now. And so I've never really cared. My editor cares very much about the spelling in my books. Whereas I'm like, it's close enough.
Yeah, I was the same. I'm kind of like, it's okay. I was not going to understand what you're saying. Like with my daughter, what is strange, it kind of happened today. My daughter, we were talking about the spelling of goat, and she said, I think goat should be GOTE. I think that makes much more sense. And I was like, yeah, it does. Like if you see the spelling of goat, it looks like go at. but GOT would be goat to me, I would say.
Yeah, I'm quite dyslexic, and yeah, I get really mad when words are spelt not how they sound.
Mhm.
So yeah, that's always bothered me in the English language when you have a word and you're like, that's not how it sounds. Like, why is there a EH in the front of photo? Clearly it should be an
Yeah.
F.
That's
Like, what's
true.
going on? Yeah.
But anyway, we're here to talk about Hope is for the Dead. So is for the Dead is a current new game that you've got listed on Kickstarter. So as this comes out on the 4th of July, you can still kind of go and get your paws on Hope is for the Dead. So if you listen to this show and it kind of tickles your fancy and it sounds like something you might be interested in, you can go and take a look on Kickstarter, and you can go and take a little bit of a closer look. But this is not your first game. In the last episode, we talked about different games that you've had before. But let's kind of like place this within the offering. Talk to us about initially like what the game is in terms of its general idea and general focus, and then we can maybe look at how it differentiates itself, or how it might be similar to games that you've already written.
Yeah, so it is the kind of the crux of it. It's the zombie apocalypse version of Forbidden Psalm. It's got the same rule set that have come in the previous games, so the same kind of core rules, with then some tweaks around the edges to kind of fit the theme. I'm a massive horror nerd, and zombie movies are my like guilty pleasure. So at the beginning of this year, I sat down and decided to write a zombie apocalypse version of the game. And that's kind of where it came from, was just that desire to make a game that I wanted to play. There's quite a few miniatures games that kind of approach that theme. I've always found them to be, there's a couple of really good ones, but I've found a lot of them not quite what I wanted, which was that kind of like desperate survival that a lot of the movies kind of speak to me, like Dawn of the Dead and things like that. So I wanted one where you're just trying to survive. Your crew is just trying to make it through. And that's kind of, a lot of the decisions in how the game plays, the differences between it and the previous offerings in the Forbidden Psalm line, all kind of speak to that kind of desperate hope, chance of survival, that kind of scrabbling around for equipment and items and ammo, and and then also like wanting to make the zombies a real threat was the other thing, because like in some of the other games you've got lots of weird and wonderful monsters and creatures, and in this, thinking about how to approach the zombies and how do I make them an interesting kind of opponent on the tabletop as well.
That's awesome. That's really cool. I remember this was like late 90s. I think it's like Resident Evil 2 time. And I remember that kind of survival horror aspect of that, where you had like a finite amount of bullets, and it was like you had to think a lot about the resources that you were using, because you had no idea how many resources there were in the future. So does resources and using things and choosing to use things or not choosing to use things, does that factor into play?
Yeah, so in previous Forbidden Psalm games, you could buy equipment between scenarios. In this, you can't. It is very much what you find is what you get. So previously, you would have a certain amount of in-game money to kit your crew out. In this, they come with random equipment. So depending what you roll at the beginning, might mean they have an assault rifle, might mean they have, a machete or a hammer or a makeshift weapon. And if you've got an assault rifle, you might not have that many shots with it as well. So then, you're having to try and find ammo and things like that. So it really does play into the kind of core concept of the game, which is that your equipment is limited, what you have is limited, and then unlike the other Forbidden Psalm games, so in the other Forbidden Psalm games, there is a narrative that you play through. So you'd play across kind of 12 scenarios, 12 to 15 scenarios, depending on the game, and they're connected narratives. In this, it's a bit different. In this, there are locations that you can visit, and there are essentially loot tables for each location that tells you what equipment that location might have. So, if you go to your medical center, you're more likely to find medical supplies. If you go to the kind of military outpost, you're going to more likely find weapons and ammo. And then the way the game plays is that you play across 2 years. And year 2, all of the locations just have less stuff. So you've got kind of diminishing returns on where you're going and kind of how your looting is going. The other kind of core mechanic in the game is noise. The more noise you generate, the more zombies appear. If you fire a gun, that generates noise. So you've got this kind of push-pull mechanic of like, well, I want to use my gun because I want to keep a distance from these zombies because there's a whole infection mechanic. But if I do, then more zombies are going to appear. And then if too many zombies appear, some really bad stuff starts to happen.
That's awesome. That sounds really cool, man. I just love zombie games. Any zombie games. I got the same zombie miniatures, but I think I got 5 or 6 zombie games, and they're just all awesome. What do you think our fixation with zombies is?
I think I think they kind of fall a little bit into that uncanny valley thing, right? Of like, they're still human, they're still recognizable, but then they are a threat, they are scary. It's that idea of like, even in death, you're not quite done. Yeah, I think that's kind of part of it. I think it's that they're hard to kill, they're kind of numerous in nature.
Yeah.
So I think there's a kind of a number of different factors that make them quite a compelling monster to go up against.
Do you think it will ever actually happen? Do you think there will be a zombie apocalypse? Are you preparing for that day?
I don't think so. I think I'd hope not. That sounds like a bad day. Yeah, I'm not sure I would survive.
No, I do something stupid like sneeze or cough at the wrong time, and that'll be me, I think. But I know it's back to the game. It's solo vs and co-op. So how does that factor in, and how does that change? Is it you have to say this is a solo game from the outset, this is a VS game from the outset, or can those kind of different game types be changed as kind of people come in and maybe drop out of the game?
Yeah, you can kind of approach it how you want each time you play. So the kind of core concept of the game is that you have your own haven. At the start, you have 25 people in your haven. And as your people die or get infected, you lose numbers. And eventually, when you run out of people, your haven has fallen, you haven't survived. So you can take your crew. So you generate from your haven of 25 people. You pick 5 to be your like scouting party that go out and actually do the missions. And those can go out on solo missions, cooperative missions, or versus missions where you go up against other people's havens for supplies and resources. And then each location you visit tells you how to play that location as a solo, co-op, or versus scenario. So if you're visiting the one of the locations is a pub, for example, if you visit the pub, it tells you kind of how many enemies, how many zombies or bandits might be there, depending on how many war bands or crews are kind of attending that scenario. So if you're playing solo, there might be more of one type of enemy and less of another. Same with co-op, and then obviously with versus as well. So it kind of, the difficulty rating shifts depending on the mode that you're playing. Yeah.
That's cool, man. It's good having that versatility, because as we all know, you especially with your job that you do, is game time could potentially be limited. You might have a game lined up and then someone drops out because they've got a family commitment or an illness or sickness or something. So having that versatility to be able to kind of change it and just go, okay, I'll just do a solo one today, or I'll play with the kids. We won't play Buckaroo. We'll play Hope is for the Dead, the cheery family game, and we'll change it to a co-op game. That's cool, man. That's super interesting. And I also noticed that you have got different types. There's different types of infected people. There's different types of zombies. So give us a little bit of an outline of who we might be bumping into in this horrible, terrible world.
Yeah, so when I approached the game and thinking about like how I wanted the infection and the zombies to work in the game to make them kind of different levels of threat, kind of led into the conceit of the game, which is the infection essentially takes over the fluid in people's eyeballs, and it makes your body produce too much of it. And it also turns it black. So when you first get infected, you are able to run. You're still very fast. Your body hasn't kind of fully shut down. So that's the first kind of stage of the infection. They're called weepers, and they're really fast moving, but they don't have that much viral load yet. So they're not that infectious. So they're kind of a threat because of how quickly they can move, but they're not as big of a threat in the sense of if you get bitten by one, you might not be infected. Your kind of crew might survive. Whereas then you get, as the infection spreads, it kind of shifts and changes. So the next one's up then are called the shamblers, which are your traditional slow-moving zombies. However, if they get hold of you and give you a bite, they're a lot more infectious. There's a bigger chance you're going to get an infection yourself. There's ones called debarks, which are essentially where the virus has started making them cough. And that cough is obviously making noise, so that generates noise that brings in more zombies. And then eventually the kind of virus starts to mutate the body, essentially just trying to produce much more and more fluid. So eventually it just mutates them to have more eyes, or like shift like the muscles in the body. So then you get mutated zombies that kind of shift and change their body structures, and they could have various things from kind of different types of attacks to different ways of moving around. There's also the putrefactioned, which is kind of where the ooze inside the body has grown to quite excessive levels and now leaks out. So whenever you kind of deal damage to them, there's a chance that they're going to splash you with infected goo. So in melee, they're quite, you kind of want to take those ones down at range if you can. And then eventually the ooze becomes all-consuming, and it's just this black goo slime kind of sludge monster that inside it somewhere there might be a body that's being slowly consumed, but it's now just become kind of almost like your blob-esque monster, and that's kind of the last stage of the infection.
Nice.
So it goes like through the gambit. There's also infected animals. So we've got in the kind of core book at the moment, there's a bunch of infected animals. The idea is that maybe a zoo got infected. So there are some standard infected animals like dogs and bears, and then we've also got an infected panda because why not?
Is that the biggest bad that you'll bump into, an infected panda, or who's the top of the infected tree? Is it the blob guy?
So it's the blob guy is the like most terrifying one at the moment. And yeah, there's definitely some more animals planned, particularly as stretch goals in the Kickstarter that we might get to, where we actually had a vote. I have a Patreon, and there was a vote on the Patreon of what animals we should add as we went along. And some of those, if they get into the game, are pretty horrifying.
Nice. Which was the best one that you would never choose? Or was there kind of someone was voting on some things like, remember Boaty McBoatface, right? Just a quick thing, Boaty McBoatface for people is that I think there was a government agency in the UK that had a public vote on what they should call their new boat. And you could put vote names forward, people to vote on. I think eventually it was Boaty McBoatface was the name of this new ship. So was there any kind of votes or names or animals that people put forward that would have been amazing, but you were never going to choose, or did that not happen? Is everyone very sensible on your Patreon?
No. So the big cat of Bodmin Moor is the most voted on. So if we hit the stretch goal to add 6 more animals, the big cat of Bodmin Moor is going to be added. So for those that don't know, the big cat of Bodmin Moor is a cryptoid, you could say, in the UK, where people think they keep seeing like large panther-like animals in Bodmin Moor, but with very little actual evidence that they exist. But so that we might be adding that to the game apparently.
Nice.
The other options were like people really wanted there to be an infected cow. That was very high up on people's list.
Legit.
So we might have an infected cow running around.
What would you choose if you had the choice of like a silly kind of tongue-in-cheek one? What would you choose, do you think?
I think ferret, just because they're actually, ferrets are kind of terrifying because they're so quick.
Leg.
Yeah, could you just imagine like an infected ferret runs up your trouser leg and you're like, I'm going to deal with that. And it's just like nibbling on you and you're like, oh no. Every tiny little bite might infect me.
That would be annoying, right? That's cool. That's awesome. And another thing that kind of is quintessential zombie kind of land is one of your party being infected and then potentially having to kill them. Does that pop up in the game?
Yeah, so it pops up in 2 ways. So one is if you have to ever deploy 20 zombies, that means you've been overrun. And the person in your party with the lowest agility score gets left behind, because you don't have to outrun the zombies, you have to outrun the slowest person. Yeah, so they get left behind and they're lost. So there is that option. The other one is there is a kind of a thing when you get bitten that you might have the hidden bite flaw, where suddenly you've got a bite that you're concealing from other people, and then you test at the start of every scenario that warband member gets deployed whether they're going to turn or not that scenario. So there is a potential that they actually turn into a zombie mid scenario.
That's cool.
Yeah, so that is definitely a thing. And there's, like I said, there's a whole infection mechanic. So as you get kind of bitten or get attacked by different zombies, there's a chance of infection. Every enemy that's infected has what we call an infection score, and then essentially you're just trying to roll on a d20 above that number. So the higher the number, the more infectious something is, the more likelihood it is that they're going to pass the infection on to you.
Nice. That's super cool. You mentioned that loot was finite and you can't buy things. Whatever you find is yours. But there's also, I always think about in zombie films and games and books, there's a lot of like tinkering around, like taping a torch to this and filing down that or sawing off your shotgun barrel. So is there kind of upgrading and developing your equipment, like tinkering around with stuff? Is that a thing?
Yeah, so you can upgrade your weapons. You can also upgrade your haven. So you can find specific items out in the world that you can bring back. So for example, with ammo, you can make yourself a station to make ammo in your haven, so that at the end of every scenario, you're going to get some free ammo. And same with your weapons, you can upgrade them to do different things. One of the stretch goals is mashup weapons, where you'll be able to kind of add extra effects to your weapons. So we're kind of barreling quite quickly towards that stretch goal. So I think we will probably unlock it. So I can give some kind of ideas behind that. So there's things like flaming death weapon, where if you take a weapon, add whiskey to it, you can add the burn property to the weapon. So enemies that are hit by that weapon will start to burn over time. You can add a silent effect to weapons so that it doesn't generate noise every time you use it, which would be good obviously for some of the guns in the game. Then there's also some very silly ones, like one of the mashup weapons is called the Sound of Music. As a nod to Shaun of the Dead, in the pub scenario, you can find the Don't Stop Me Now on vinyl. And if you get that and add it to a weapon, the weapon gets an extra effect.
Nice. That's cool, man. How much fun was it putting this together? And did you find yourself just sitting there staring at a wall, just thinking of cool stuff that you kind of appreciate from this world of zombies that's been created through all the different kind of media that exists?
Yeah, it was super fun. And I think because I'm such a big zombie nerd, it was actually like quite straightforward to pull together. I didn't realize how much zombie material, like media, I've consumed over the years. And just like little references here and there, like the character names in the list of names that you can roll on to name your characters, like are all derived from zombie movies of some various kinds. Thinking up like little in-jokes and things like that and references, and it was quite fun as well. But yeah, just pulling it together and also thinking about how do you make a game fun when kind of part of zombie movies is the mass of zombies appearing, and how do you deal with like being overrun by lots of zombies, because you don't want a game where you feel like, oh, I have to now move 20 models. That could be quite boring, that suddenly you're bogged down in the admin of trying to play the game. So thinking about like, and that's where the noise mechanic came in, and if you ever have to deploy too many zombies, you're essentially fleeing the scenario. One of my favorite mechanics actually in it is that you can generate noise by just shouting. So if you're playing versus, for example, your warband could just all shout and run away, and then just leave your opponent have to deal with like all the zombies that turn up. Which I think that's quite a fun thing.
That's cool, man. That's awesome. That's really, really good. It sounds like it's just a super awesome game. But we know from our last chat that artwork forms a really essential part of what you put together. So how fun has that been? Kind of drawing some stuff yourself, asking your family to draw some stuff, and supporting artists. You mentioned supporting artists is something that you really like to do. So how happy are you with the art as it comes together?
Yeah, it's been really great actually. So I kind of set out very early on wanting this to be a black and white book, pulling into that theme of the black fluid coming out of the eyes and how the infection kind of manifests as this like black goo. So I was like, okay, I'm going to make this book black and white. I've never done that before, where I've just stuck so rigidly to like a color scheme in a book. And that then really informed the overall design of a lot of like black sprays and black marks in the book, and then into the artwork as well. And yeah, getting to work again with some of my favorite artists that I've worked with before, Boris and Vil, getting them to draw up some pretty gnarly looking zombies was quite fun. Boris is currently drawing up some of the zombie animals, it's great to see those come together as well. And then kind of looking for ways to communicate things quite easily, because with it being black and white, you're not necessarily being able to do spot colors to like bring attention to key bits of information for people. So then finding new ways of doing that with kind of redacted markers under them, or finding cool icon imagery that you can use. So like with each location you go to, on the table of items that you can find at that location, at the top, it has the different icons of like, so if it's got a gun icon, that location is good for finding guns. If it's got medicine, it's good for medicine, that kind of thing. So just finding like, easy reference icons and bits like that. So yeah, it's been really fun to pull the design together and do the layout, and to stick to something so rigid has been quite fun, because a lot of the times in previous books I've been quite free form and just doing whatever I want at any time. So this has been quite a fun restriction to just stick to a very black and white theme, and to make it cohesive.
Nice, that's cool, man. How streamlined are you keeping it in terms of being just a rule book? Is there opportunities to have, because you got some stretch goals there. Like, is an opportunity to have like like a little board with some stickers on, so you got your little haven, and you can kind of, once you do certain things, you can stick on a little new part to your base, or is it just going to be strictly a rule book?
So at the moment, it's the rule book. We've got some stretch goals that do add some extra things. So one is a sheet of tokens, which will help, obviously, for people that don't want to sit there and paint 20 zombie minis. So we've got some tokens that you can use to represent your additional zombies. We've also got, there is the crew sheet and the haven record. So those will be produced if we hit the stretch goals, will be produced as a book for people, so that you've got an additional little kind of notebook that you can keep track of your haven in. It's got a place for you to write down all 25 names of all the people in your haven. It's got all the upgrades that you can apply to your haven in there, that kind of thing. We try and keep it simple in terms of the stuff we produce, just because previous Kickstarters learned the lesson of like, if I'm getting like 7 things manufactured by 7 manufacturers, that's 7 points of failure. And it means the delay between me getting the book to people after the Kickstarter like gets longer for everything we add. So that's why I'm always like super cautious, and I'm just going to stick to print material that I know I can get to people. Having said that, we do have some fun stuff on the way. So we've actually got some free zombie STLs coming that we haven't actually put on the Kickstarter yet. So that's an exclusive. We're going to be announcing that probably next week. That have been donated by a partner of ours, Victus Miniatures. That's going to be free to all backers. We've also got a stretch goal, which is a more narrative campaign called the Road to Salvation, where you actually trying to, it's the outbreak first starts and your crew is just trying to get out of the city to somewhere safe. So that's planned. And then we also have a planned stretch goal, if we get to it, to add the rules to this game to Last War, to take the zombie outbreak into the setting of Last War, because that's been quite a requested setting for people.
Yeah, sure. That's awesome, man. That's super cool. That kind of leads, that Road to Salvation kind of links in with the next question that I was going to ask. Awesome segue. But, so the rule book, the main rule book as it starts, is when the infection is already established. So government is dissolved. Would that be correct? It's like literally small, isolated bands of people that are kind of trying to survive. Would that be right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So it's kind of, we've already descended past that point of governments forming effective resistance to this.
Nice. And who can we buddy up with? Who can we encounter? Are you going to have like a bus driver and a police officer and a guy that works in the corner shop? Who are these people that we are going to be playing with? And how do they come together? And what sort of ways have we got to kind of form those groups?
Yeah, so you've got you essentially roll you can either do this at the start or when you generate them. So you need 5 crew members to be your like scavenger crew from your haven. And people can either, as they need new crew members, generate them then, or they can at the beginning of the game when they play generate all 25 names if they want and put them into their haven. And there is, a list of D100 names. There'll also be an additional list of D100 names that will come from the Kickstarter backers. So people can add their names as well. And then the other thing you will roll on is people's backgrounds. So things like, are they a police officer? And then they might get a little bit of a bonus if they were, or a negative, depending on what their background was. So similar to the game in Dread Knights, we had people had occupations that gave them just little bonuses or negatives. And this has a similar thing where it's just like, this person was an athlete, they get +1 agility. Or and then you can start filling out their stories, of what they did before the apocalypse and now what they're trying to do now. And then because you also roll randomly for their weapons and equipment, you can start building a story of like, well, how did this like athlete come across this shotgun? And why does he have a shotgun with only 2 ammo? Stuff like that.
That's cool, man. What's your favorite part of this new game? What's been your favorite thing to kind of get in there, or your favorite thing to experience?
I think one of my favorite things about it is that it plays, despite it having the same rule set as my other games, it plays quite differently, because in the other games when your characters die in your warband, you're just always going to get new ones. And in this, you're a lot more cautious with character death, because you're like, well, I've only got a set number. So you approach it more like a survival horror game because of that mechanic. So for me, that's kind of one of the really cool things. I think the other thing is, in the other games, once you've kind of got enough gold and resource and all your people are equipped with like a lot of good weapons, equipment, the incentive to keep going and looting, and you start just kind of focusing more on the missions and getting the missions done than you do on the need for new equipment. And this the kind of core conceit is that you just need to get new stuff constantly. So you're encouraged to go out there and loot and try and find things, and it just makes it that when you roll on the table and you find something you've been looking for that entire time, or a really cool piece of equipment, it matters so much more. And then you don't get to keep that equipment until the character gets off the table. So suddenly, again, the survival of that character becomes so much more important. And you start doing things like sacrificing someone that's less important, because you're like, but this guy's got the thing our haven's been looking for like 3 scenarios. He's got the upgrade piece we needed to make the ammo table, or the greenhouse to get extra food, or whatever it is. It's like, we need to get that back to base more importantly than any of your lives. So suddenly, you've got your characters throwing themselves in harm's way to rescue some duct tape. Which is just like a fun thing.
How does that fit in with the versus mode? Because can I go after an opposition group, and do I get to like loot their body? Is that a thing?
Yeah, so items in the game can be picked up off of downed or dead people. So if you see someone like picks up something and you're like, oh crap, I need that too, you can totally target them and try and go after it. And then you get that kind of thing of like, you don't want to make noise, right? Because more zombies appear, but suddenly that person's got a thing you really need, and all you've got is a gun. So maybe you're going to fire it, because now you don't care about noise and how many zombies are turning up, because you just really focus in on needing that piece of equipment, whatever it is. Or so it kind of, the game dynamic can shift across a scenario depending on what people find and what loot people find. And
Nice. Did you manage to fit in an idea of like wear and tear on individuals in your parties? They might not be deceased or infected, but I just guess existing is pretty terrible. And so is like kind of any stress or strain that they go under? Is there any injuries that can kind of be persistent?
Yeah, so there is an injury table. So if people get dropped to 0 HP and don't die, because you roll to see whether they die or not, they then get an injury. And there are different injuries they can get, from head trauma to sepsis to broken hands to concussions, to just kind of broken spirit. So they're just starting to kind of get fatigued by it all. So there are definitely injuries that you can pick up across. And there's also XP. So your characters can learn by the encounters they go on, and they can level up, and they can get new feats, get rid of flaws, get rid of injuries, stuff like that as well. So there's ways to kind of temper back some of the negatives that you'll encounter as your characters get injured and hurt and potentially infected. And one of the other mechanics on infection is when you get bitten, you can take the missing limb injury to stop the infection.
Yeah,
but
man.
to do so, you have to pass a presence test. So your character has to like have enough kind of will of mind to cut off the limb, cut off the hand that's been bitten, and then they've now got a missing limb injury. Yeah.
Oh, dude, that's pretty.
Yeah.
That's pretty gnarly, that one. So as we kind of begin to pivot into a slightly different area, is there anything that we've not mentioned about the new game that you'd like to bring up?
No, I think it's on Kickstarter. Please go check it out. It will be out pretty soon after the Kickstarter, so the game is pretty much feature complete and it's all laid out. It's had its first edit pass. There'll be any little extras that we add as part of the Kickstarter will get added, but otherwise the game will be coming to backers about a month after the Kickstarter ends, usually is the time frame. So if it interests you, you don't need to wait a long time if you do decide to back. It's on Kickstarter for 10 quid for the digital, and then I think the prices are around 20 for the soft. I'm going to get my own pricing wrong here. And if you want the hardcover, there's I think 35. And we've also got 2-player options there, so if you've got more people that want to get into it, you can get some discounts and stuff as well. So yeah, I think that's everything on it.
It's good, man. I mean, I'm just on it now. Like £10 for that kind of PDF. That's awesome. So £10 for the PDF, £20 for the soft cover, and then it is 35 for the hard cover. So that's good. I like the fact that it's so accessible, and you're given that PDF version. That's really cool. That's awesome, man. And you can get it for a mate as well. You can get two. So you can get two for a cheap price. It's hard to resist. We all know that getting a friend interested in something is sometimes hard. But if you kind of like, mate, here's your own little rule book. Just take it home, have a little bit of a read. Any barriers that your friend might have, you can kind of batter down. But before we move on, I've got 2 other questions. You can get your own pet in there. You get there's one of the pledge levels. You can get your own pet. So that there's only one that exists. It might have gone by the time that this goes out. But are you anticipating someone putting their hamster or their kind of iguana or something in there?
Yeah, potentially. So we always do one tier that's like silly price. We literally, title it like this is for people who have more sense than more money than sense. And we've done them previously, and they've gone, and people have like opted in for them. And it's I think in the previous one it was you could be added to the book as a mercenary. So we worked with the person and actually added to the book as a mercenary. And yeah, we thought we'd do one where if you want your pet to be a zombified animal, immortalized forever as an undead in this book, then that's something that you could opt in for. It's a very silly price. You get a bunch of extras as well. And yeah, I think we're going to add some stuff to that tier as well, just to as we go along the campaign. So if somebody does have more money than sense and wants to support the project, please do. But don't feel obligated to either. That one is there partly like for someone who wants to do that, but also partly as a bit of a joke. We always have a slightly silly tier. There's always a slightly silly stretch goal. This one is that we would actually make a like zombie-proof shelter out of books. We would buy enough books. If we hit £1 million, which we won't do, we will buy enough books to make a zombie-proof house. Yeah,
that's awesome, man. So a final question before we pivot away is I wouldn't say that I've done anything of note really, but what I do know when I've created things is that quite often you start off with like a wide variety of things before you actually do the project, and as you go through the project you kind of have to get the scissors out and chop off a lot of things that don't necessarily concentrate well down into the finished product. So is there any things that you really wanted to include in the book as it stands right now that you just maybe won't have an opportunity to yet or ever?
Yeah, it was the rules for different eras. So it was, giving people the rules and options to play their zombie apocalypse in fantasy settings or in World War One or different kind of eras. It started pulling the book in different directions, and actually it didn't quite work in the same way that it has in previous books where I've done that. So what I decided to do was actually, no, let's focus this on a modern setting and that kind of modern zombie outbreak, and then later on I could do kind of additional things for people that want those era specific settings like the World War One zombies, etc. And yeah, it made the book better for taking it out, because when I first started, it was in there, and it made the whole thing a bit muddled.
Yeah.
This is also going to be the cheapest of the books I've done, because it's about 100 and something pages, so its page count is a bit lower. Whereas if we put that content in, we're going to be pushing it up. And I wanted a game that has the lowest point of entry for people that we could, particularly because unlike my other games where you're only needing 5 models, this one you need more models. So I'm aware the kind of point cost of entry for people playing this game is going to be higher on the model count. So trying to keep the cost of the game down, and then the game book down, was kind of a factor in that as well. So I was like, okay, well, let's get this core book out, and then we can always add like zines and small add-ons to it that give people options for playing it in a World War One setting, a cyberpunk setting, or a fantasy setting.
It's hard to grumble at 10 quid, mate. You sort of think with inflation and all that kind of stuff that we're talking about. It's probably a cup of tea is a tenner now. So like you're gonna get the whole game for £10. It's pretty good, man. Thanks for that. It's really appreciated. So yeah, that's awesome. So that sounds like a really great game, really fun game. Random question as we kind of pivot, as I've mentioned a couple of times now. Do you think there might be an era, an epoch, or a civilization that you think would be most resistant to a zombie apocalypse?
Oof. I suppose it depends on what kind of zombies. Are we talking slow? Are we talking fast? I think places where people listen and actually plan and use precautionary principle. And what I mean by that is, if we take, without getting political, the COVID outbreak in the example, there were definitely countries that did better and were able to pull together in a more community way. And there were definitely countries that didn't like to be told what to do and ended up with higher rates of infection and more people dying. And I think that's a good example where, you definitely see some countries that are more willing to kind of do the right thing for public good and the health of everybody. And you definitely see countries there and areas of the world where people go, no, sod it, individualism. And I think those kind of places aren't going to do as well. I think if you've got an existential threat, whatever it is, but let's just say zombies for this example, and you've got a society that isn't good at working together, I think the zombies are going to make easy picking of that.
Yeah, for sure. And it also depends on why people are doing the right thing. Are they doing the right thing for the correct moral intended aim, or are they doing the correct thing because they got a cracker on the back of the head and tossed in a wagon if they don't?
Well, 100%. Yeah. And, I think when you have those kind of, and there are places around the world where people come together and seem to, and they were definitely in the, I'm in the UK, and during COVID the sense of community was a lot stronger than we've probably had in the country for a very long time. And that was really wonderful to see. And I think places where you have a stronger sense of community and people doing things for the right reason together would do better in a zombie apocalypse than those that would want to pull apart and be selfish and try and survive. And yeah,
man, that's awesome. Cool. So we can still talk about Purpose for the Dead here, but I wanted to spend a little bit of time in this conversation talking about what makes a good game for you, because obviously before you wrote rule sets, you were playing a lot more. So what sort of things exist in games, or what sort of things you purposely put in your games that you believe make a great game?
Yeah, I think so. It's a weird thing, right? Because I write rules, but I actually think one of the thing that make the best games aren't always the rules. Sometimes games and game designers, and I've definitely been guilty of this at times myself, you come up with a really good rule and you go, this rule really makes sense, like it's really quite good in terms of like how the math works or how it's structured within the game, but you don't actually think about, but how does it facilitate fun in the game, or how does it facilitate storytelling in the game, or and suddenly you've got a rule that on paper looks great, makes a lot of sense, but when you actually get to playing the game is actually kind of a hindrance. And I think the best games are games where they get that kind of lovely match between simplistic but not too simple rules, which give depth and options for players so that they feel like they're making interesting choices without getting in the way of them making choices, or without someone having to read a 50-page kind of rule PDF every time they try and play to remember which thing does which, or and some of that even leads into like just how the rules are laid out. So you can have pretty straightforward rules, but if they're poorly presented, you can also again add confusion to players. And again, your rules of your game can get in the way of your game. Yeah.
How do you iron that out in the layout process? You know, because you also got something because that what we're trying to do is you've got a vision that's in your head, and you've got an interpretation that you're laying out. But you just mentioned there about kind of individualistic people that maybe might see it in a radically different way. So how does that layout process work?
Yeah, so the way I do it is I come at the game kind of with my first draft. It goes through an editor who has a good eye for essentially thinking from a player's perspective. There's some playtesting that goes on, but also then giving it out to the community. So Hopeless for the Dead, for example, so if my Patreon backers get early access to games and get to play early versions of them, and I quickly get a sense from the questions that come back, what are the sticking points? What are the areas where I've not done that as well as I've wanted to? Where people are coming and going, oh, is this what you meant? And I'm like, no, it's not. Okay, clearly I've not explained that very well, or clearly that rule needs to change. And also people will come back and be like, this feels, like an unnecessary addition to the game. Like it's not actually adding to the fun. It's adding just to the kind of complexity or the kind of not the fun in that way of the game. So I think you quickly start learning from people, and I think with this being my like 7th or 8th kind of rip on the same rule set now, I feel like I've learned quite a bit about what, at least for people that seem to like these games, that they like. And again, it's horses for courses, so that there are people that love really gritty games that have every specific scenario laid out of what you do with each rule interaction, or they've got an army list that you build, and then you have to give every unit a piece of equipment, and you have to point it all up, and there are people that absolutely love doing that, and then there are people that hate that, and that would be the antithesis of fun for them. So it's also accepting that I'm not going to appease or cater for everyone, so it's finding the ways that I want to cater to the people that will like this, but also a lot of that is just then what caters to me, and then assuming there's probably some other people out there like me. And yeah, I think that's the kind of the way of getting around it, is just having a good editor who knows gameplay, who knows game mechanics, who can kind of tease out what you actually meant when you wrote a rule, letting people get hold of it, listening to their feedback, not being so precious about your work that you're like, oh, you just don't understand. It's like, no, I've done a bad job of explaining this. Like if a single person comes back and doesn't understand a rule, maybe it's on them. If 2 people come back, it's on you. Like if 3, like you've not done a good job to explain a thing. So yeah, being kind of open to that criticism of like, this doesn't quite work as well as you've wanted it to. And then being willing to learn as you go along. There's definitely rules in my first versions of the game that in hindsight would be better written in a different way. And in fact, a key one on that is, and it has been rewritten since the last game I did, there's a mechanic in the game around like fleeing combat, and the way it was written before just was a bit more obtuse. So we've now reworded it and changed it, and it now is just so much more obvious what you need to do in that scenario for people, and it just makes much more sense. And that took like 5 books before I realized that rule was just kind of badly worded.
Dice. How do you feel about dice?
In what way? Like which dice to use?
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
In a direction like that, how do you decide what to use, what not to use? I mean, if you take a very simple example, you can rolling 2d6 as an example and picking the highest, or rolling 2d6 and trying to get a certain number. Re-rolls. How scientific are you with that sort of stuff?
So I'm not overly scientific. I do some like math crafting, for want of a better word, in my head when I plan games and think about, what is your likelihood of success? Because you really want players to be succeeding more than they're failing. Because if they're failing, they're not having fun necessarily. And the way I kind of get around that is, in the games I've created, you're using a D20, you're aiming for a 12 or more, which would suggest you have a less than 50% chance of succeeding, but you get to add some modifiers. So you can kind of, and then, you also might have some negative modifiers. So it's then you pick your character's best stat, and you kind of get players to have some agency in the numbers they're aiming for. And it means that more often than not, it's more than 50% of the time that they're succeeding at what they want to do. And that was kind of a key thing for me, is allowing players to kind of determine how they approach an issue or a thing, an attack, whatever it is, picking the one that gives them the highest chance of success and then rolling for that. In terms of the kind of dice to use, I like games that use just D6s. I like games that use D10s, D20s. So I'm not particularly precious about one given type of dice over others. I know some people really love D6s and will swear by them forever, and there are other people that hate them. I know there's a load of discussion around how Games Workshop, 40K would be a better game if it used different dice than D6s. And to some extent I can understand it, because it's a weird game in that you've got knights that get an invulnerable save on a 4-up, and then you've got tiny little dudes that get the same invulnerable save on a 4-up, and you're like, well, how does this giant hulking monstrosity with armor and force fields get the same save as this tiny little dude? Like, and it's because it's an abstraction and they're using a D6, and people are like, well, if they use different dice, they could. So I do get that there are people who are very into that kind of mentality around it. I'm not as much. I think the dice are a facilitation to us having fun. And essentially, we're just playing with toy soldiers, but because we're grown-ups, we can't do it without rules. So we need dice to determine what happens and the outcome, because we can't just be like, well, my toys beat your toys because I say so.
That's cool, man. Is there a game experience that you've had in the past that has used dice really well or seamlessly? Because I kind of see dice a little bit like a referee in a sports game. It's like they're there and they kind of help and they guide the process along, but they're not like, they shouldn't be, in my opinion, the front and center and visible all of the time. Does that kind of make sense? Or is there a dice experience that you've had with a game that you can remember that's done it really well?
Yeah, I think I quite liked how the Infinity game did it, Infinity Miniatures game. But it's quite a complicated dice mechanics. It does take some explaining. So essentially in that game, you have a D20 as your core dice. You're rolling below a target number to achieve success. And if I'm remembering that right, but you're also trying to get as close to your number as you can, because your opponent also gets to roll dice and your numbers cancel each other out. So for example, let's say my target number was a 15. I want to roll a 15 or under, and my opponent target number might be a 13. And then we roll our dice, and I might be rolling more dice than them, or they might be rolling more than me, but you roll your dice and then you compare them. So anything that rolled above your target number is cancelled straight away. So you ignore all those dice. If they roll, let's say my opponent rolled a 12 and I rolled a 9, so we've both rolled a success, but their 12 beats my 9 because that's a higher value. Whereas if I rolled a 13, I would have beaten their 12. So you kind of do that, and then you see what dice are left, and then you apply the things. So I quite liked it as a mechanic because it meant that both players every time were getting to roll dice and getting to have agency around choices that are being made. So I like it for that reason. But then on the flip side, it takes some explaining. And for a lot of more kind of people that maybe don't want to get into that kind of really nitty gritty dice rolling and working out probabilities and stuff like that, it can be a bit much. So I enjoyed it, but I can understand why some players might not. I think the other games I've kind of enjoyed, and bear with me while I explain why I really enjoyed this. There is a role play game, and I'm going to mention the property in a minute after I explain who I was playing it with. I was playing it with my 2 children. And they picked the game, to be very clear. And it is the My Little Pony role-play game.
What's wrong with that?
And the reason I love the dice mechanic is the way it worked is the better at something you were, you just got a bigger dice. So if you were rubbish at something, you got a D4. And if you're okay, you got a D8. And if you're really good, you got a D12. And I just really like the simplicity of that dice mechanic.
Yeah.
It's so obvious to someone, like the bigger dice you get, the better you are, the more chance of success you have. And when you're playing with children in particular, like trying to explain why they would make a choice over another choice isn't always straightforward. But if it's like, that's the bigger dice, that one is better because it's bigger, so you should be using the thing that gives you the bigger dice, is a really straightforward mechanic to explain to them. And it meant that they would make the choices that gave their characters the most chance of success each time. And sometimes they wouldn't. Sometimes they're like, yeah, but I don't really care about succeeding. I just want to do the fun thing. And then again, they're getting to make that choice. They're getting to like take a higher chance of failure because they're trying to do something more fun. Which again was like a really interesting thing to watch my children make those decisions as we played. And I've never seen another game quite use that. So have that idea of like actually improve the dice you're using, change the dice value in that way. So I found that as a really interesting dice mechanic.
That's cool, man. That's super cool. And lore, because a lot of the game I can only talk about myself, but for me, the games that I enjoy the most exist more in my head when I'm sitting at my desk at work or I'm doing something that's non-game related. So how important is lore to you in terms of, just the things that you enjoy? Is lore an important factor in the things that you enjoy or not so much?
It is, yeah. So I'm much more of a narrative gamer. I'm much more of a story-based person than I am kind of rules to some extent. So for me, I want to tell the stories of the characters that I'm playing with, and I want to play in interesting worlds. I was actually having this conversation recently with someone around settings that there are no good guys. And I'm not a massive fan of those settings because I like to be able to play characters who I can be interested in and root for. Whereas if I'm playing the bad guys and everybody's playing the bad guys, I want everyone to lose. So, it's why I have played 40k. When I do, I play the Tyranids because I'm like, well, they're just hungry. At least they don't seem to be. Yeah, they're not overtly evil. They just want to eat everything, and maybe they eat a bit too much. But we've all been there. So yeah, lore is a big factor for me. And I think a game can be made or broken on bad lore or uninteresting lore, or lore that doesn't fit someone's particular taste. So again. Fully like grim dark games where it's like everyone's terrible. I'm like, okay, that might not be for me.
So you like the kind of the black and the white and this is the good guy, we should root for this guy, this is clearly the bad guy. Now what is it about that you like, or have you never really thought about that? I'm not sure. Sorry, it's a bit of a difficult question maybe.
No. I think it's that's part of it, is the black and white, but also like I don't mind games with shades of gray where it's like, okay, here's a character that might not be that good but has to do the right thing or whatever. I think it's just where settings are everyone is objectively terrible is where I start like getting to the way, because like essentially it's that thing of like I've joked about it before, I really like bolt action as a game, but I don't want to play the Nazis. And I don't want to play anybody that is really enthusiastic about playing the Nazis. I don't mind people who are like, oh, I'm happy to play as the Nazis. That's fine. But when people are like, no, I'm really happy to play the Nazis, I'm like, oh, okay. And it's that kind of thing of like when the faction that you're playing is just awful, it's hard for me to want to root for them. Whereas, if they're like gray area. So Infinity does a good job, I think, of this, where all the factions have a reason to root for them, but also root against them. Like there are things that each one has done that isn't great, but they're also, some of them are trying to do the right thing. Whereas I would say stuff like 40k, where it's just like the good guys are the fascists, is like, I'm not sure that's a saying that subjectively appeals to me in that way. So yeah, I think I just like some story that I can get behind someone in the story and kind of root for, if not them, what they're doing.
Inches, centimeter movements, tape measures, fan of that?
Yeah, it's funny because I get asked a lot why I used inches in the games, and the honest answer is the biggest audience for my games is in America, and when I used centimeters, they got mad. Because they
selling out, man. You're selling
yourself. I know, right? And it's also because a lot of the games I played were in inches, so it just kind of became the default. But in terms of like actually like trading between centimeters or inches, I'm quite happy to do both. It's funny because again, I've talked about it a couple of times. Infinity, it's a game I no longer play that's a game where like you're not allowed to pre-measure. So you
Mm,
just have to guess what you're doing and then measure, and you might just fail because you guessed wrong.
mm,
And I think that's a really interesting mechanic as well. But I think it's a weird one because I quite enjoyed it myself, but I also think for a lot of people it's just weirdly punishing, and it's like, oh, you're just not good at judging distance, therefore you
I've got
can't play
one
this
eye.
game.
Yeah.
Right? It's just this weird mechanic where it's just like you're punishing people for, yeah, I'm not sure. So yeah, I quite like I quite like the weird debate that you get about people who are really adamant about using inches and people who are really adamant about using centimeters. And I'm kind of in the middle going, just use whatever you want.
Doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cubits,
Yeah.
hands.
I've
Um,
had some people convert my games into 15 millimeter scale.
yeah, yeah,
And again, there are people really passionate about playing games in 15 mil. They will never
yeah,
play them at 28 mil scale. And I'm like, I kind of love that there are people out there that do that, and
yeah,
that they're set on that. I'm not a person that particularly cares about the scale of a game, but I love that there are people out there who are like, no, no, I really do care. And I'm going to take
yeah,
your game and convert it all.
yeah,
And I'm like, that's kind of awesome that you're willing to spend that much kind of
yeah.
energy on making the game how you want it to be, because that's how it should
Have,
be.
yeah. Have you ever thought about like grid-based stuff? Like in inch squares or maybe hex-based? Has that ever been something that you've encountered, thought of, like, not like?
Yeah, I'm actually playing with that mechanic for a feature thing. So it's a game. It's still going to be Forbidden Psalm kind of rule set, but it's based on grids because there's it's a sci-fi version called Legitimate Salvage, and you'll be on various space stations, spaceships, and things like that. And it's a good way of indicating like where something can happen. So you can have a
Mm,
random event happen, and it's like, oh, there's going to be a breach on the ship, and there's going to be all the air is going to get sucked out in space, right? So now I need to have an easy way of indicating where on the board that happens. Well, if it's a
mm,
grid-based board, that becomes very simple.
mm.
You roll for your x-axis, your y-axis, and you put down your marker. So yeah, that's something I'm actually playing with for a future game, and I think that can be quite fun. I think it makes for a different game, and I think it creates a different mentality when you're playing because you suddenly start feeling a bit more rigid because it's like, well, I can only move based on this grid.
Mhm. Yeah.
um, so yeah, I think that it's an interesting where I'm like, it adds a lot of interesting gameplay options, but it also creates a rigidity that I think some people like and some people probably don't.
Yeah, it adds a certain amount of clarity as well, though, in terms of like I can move 6 squares, and it kind of speeds that up. I'm sure you've played games where people are measuring and then forgetting and then measuring again and then forgetting and measuring a third time. Whereas if you've got something that is grid based, it kind of maybe potentially speeds that up. And hex, I quite like hex games that are based on hexes. I think that's quite nice. There's a lot of interaction, a lot of variety of movements, a variety of combats that could occur on hex-based stuff. Have you played any kind of either hex or grid-based games that kind of jump out to you as being good games?
I've played, so I don't even know if this is an actual game. An old friend of mine got me into an old version of, is it BattleTech?
Yeah,
The
yeah, yeah.
mech.
Battletech, yeah, yeah, yeah. That's
Yeah,
hex-based, yeah.
and yeah, that was hex based. Yeah, and I had quite a lot of fun with that because again, it does speed up certain aspects of the game of like, okay, this thing can move 3 hexes.
Mm,
That's nice and easily done. Again, you don't need to get the tape measure out and measure and stuff. You can count how many hexes it is between you and your opponent if you've got a range of so whatever it is. So
mm,
I quite enjoyed that, and had a lot of fun with that sense. So yeah, I do think grids and hex based systems can speed up a game as well and can offer different gameplay like options, and the ones I have played I've had fun with. I've
mm,
also come from playing a lot of board games which are much more about using grid based systems to make movement simpler, um, and I've always enjoyed doing that as well. um,
mm.
I think it's again, I think there are some players that really hate it. I'm probably in one
Yeah.
of those camps that I'm like, if the overall gaming experience is fun and the mechanics don't get in the way of that fun, I'm kind
Mm.
of here for all different kinds of mechanics.
Mm. I think variety is good though. That's why our hobby is so amazing. Is there's so many different ways people can access it, different things that people can enjoy, and having a different variety. And I think the right tool for the right job is something that if it feels natural, if it feels like that's the right thing for this. It's like on a spaceship, like you mentioned, like on a spaceship that kind of lends itself to grid-based, rooms, hallways, that kind of thing. And I always think of Space Hulk the GW game back in the day, Space Hulk. I think it's really good with its grid based, and the face-ins really matter. And you got these huge guys in suits, and then little fast alien guys, gribbly guys that are kind of jumping around the place. I think it's really cool. But anyway, that's all we've got time for, mate. It's been fantastic talking to you again, and we wish you the very best with I Hope Is for the Dead. It's another amazing kind of eyeful of awesomeness that also translates into what potentially is an awesome game too. And I think it's definitely going to go on my zombie collection because I don't know, just fixated, just something about that zombie world. Or it's just really good. It's just really deep. It's really interesting. And hopefully I'm never involved in one because I don't think I'd do very well. But yeah, thanks for your time, mate. We really appreciate it. It's been great to talk to you again. I hope you feel well soon. Thank you for coming onto the show, even though you're getting over a cold. Is there anything you want to kind of round out with? Is there anything that we maybe haven't spoken about that you want to bring out before we leave?
No, I think that's everything. The Kickstarter runs for another like 18 days, I think it is, from when we're recording. So I think it ends around the end, like middle of July. So I think it's like the 20th of July or something like that. So yeah.
How's your final question? How much of a refresher are you? Are you always clicking the refresh and seeing what's come about, or you kind of leave it to the gods?
I used to be awful at like checking every 5 minutes, and now I've learned that way lies madness. So now I kind of I wait until I get an email notifying me if someone's left a comment or has asked a question. Otherwise, I kind of leave it alone and then check in once a day. I allow myself a once a day check in, and then I walk away and leave it alone.
Nice. Well, all the very best, and I hope next time you check it the next day tomorrow. I hope it's made some positive progress, mate. Thanks a lot for your time.
No worries. Take care.
So there you go, episode 200 and whatever it is, 47, all wrapped up there. Thanks again to Will for coming on the show. Always a great guy, always a fun and interesting time. We wish him all the very best with his kickstarting endeavors. Interesting that you mentioned it was a black and white book, and it's always good to check out the artwork in his books. It's always a pretty cool, interesting artwork, so that's good. Go and check it out. Again, I mentioned it in the show, zombie games. That's really cool. They're really cool games. I like zombie type games. I like that post-apocalyptic type games. I wonder why we as human beings are, not everybody, but a lot of human beings are kind of obsessed with, like, end of world type things. It's kind of one of the things that you're interested in, but you probably don't want to be part of. You probably want to be, I don't know, it's just pretty interesting. It's pretty amazing. I think there's maybe something in our psychology, something in our brains which makes us interested in that sort of thing. I'm not sure if it's a good thing or not, whether it's learned as we learn and grow up, or whether it's something that we're born with. I don't know. That's pretty interesting. Yeah, cool. Right, so that's pretty much it. I don't have any hobby stuff to talk about of note, really, because I'm away from my hobby desk, so I'm not playing A Song of Ice and Fire. I'm not playing my tabletop games. I'm not painting so much, but it's been really nice just to hang out, go to the beach, that kind of stuff. So I've not really got much hobby stuff to talk about, really. Not really playing many games either. Playing Spanish Queens. Spanish Queens is the clean name to the card game that we play called Shithead. I'm not sure if that's the official name. I'm not sure if Shithead is actually a big deal. I don't know if people know about Shithead. I don't even know how I learned how to play Shithead. But there you go. There's a little bit of a research homework project. You can find the British card game Shithead. And if you're playing with minors, not the people that go in holes, if you're playing with young people, non-legal adults, you can call it Spanish Queens. I don't know why it's called Spanish Queens, but there you go. That's what we call it when we go out. We go out for an Aperol spritz, or we go out for a beer at night time with the kids, and we play a bit of Spanish Queens. But it's a good game. It's a fun game. It's down to luck. It's down to a little bit of skill, but it's quite good because I'll leave it to you. Go and research it. Go and check it out. Go and have a look at Spanish Queens or Shithead and see if you've played it and by a different game, and if you play that game or you've played that game under a different name. Let me know. I'd be interested to know if you know of it, and I'd be interested to know if you call it a different name. But it's a good holiday game. We play it mostly when we're on holiday because you just need a pack of cards, like a regular set of playing cards, and some time and some beers as well also help. But that's enough of the post ramble. Hope you guys are doing well. I hope you guys are doing good. It'd be awesome if you guys, especially the post-ramble ramblers, and identify yourself in this as well, if you are a post-ramble rambler. It'd be great if we put together some stuff for the 250th episode. I ain't got any idea what's going to happen. I ain't got any idea if anyone's going to do anything. And not in a positive or negative way. I'm not going to have a little bit of a cry if no one comes through, but it'll just be interesting to see what we can put together, really. So if you got some time, spare 5 minutes, check out the answers and record something and send it across, paintalltheminis@gmail.com, and identify yourself as the post-ramble rambler. That'd be good to know who comes through and who's a post-ramble rambler. Probably going to be reaching out to some people who've been on the show previously as well, some guests, and maybe ask them to put together a little bit of a recording on stuff. But yeah, that's enough of the post-ramble. Hope you're all good. I hope you're all keeping on an even keel. Swing by the Discord if you haven't already, and you can check out our weekly quiz. You can check out our dad jokes that have come back, our weekly dad jokes, and you can hang out and interact and chat to us all. And our weekly league, monthly league, whatever it is just, we're starting up that. There's 5 of us that are starting a Hive League. I don't know how to play that, so I need to figure out how to play that. Otherwise, it's going to be a tough time for my opponents, because I'm not really going to give them a good game. So I need to kind of brush up on the rules and figure out how to play to make sure that the games that we play are going to be interesting for the people I play against. But yeah, take it easy. Until next time we're together, keep playing shithead.